My daughter-in-law made a joke about me in German in front of her rich family. She looked at her father and said, "That poor, old-fashioned woman shouldn't be here today. She embarrasses me." I laughed so hard that her eyes opened wide when I said 3 words in German. She went completely pale. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own daughter-in-law would humiliate me in front of her rich family, but there I was sitting at that elegant dining table, swallowing every cruel word that came out of her mouth, in German. Camilla's parents' house was stunning, I must admit. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, and a table so long it could seat 20 people. I, Paulina, at 67, felt small in that dining room that looked like something out of a European decorating magazine. I had accepted the invitation to dinner because my son David insisted so much that I couldn't refuse. "It's important for Camilla that you meet her parents," he had told me that morning. "They came from Germany especially to meet you." How naive my son was. If he had known what his wife really thought of me, perhaps he would have thought twice before insisting so much. I sat where Camilla indicated, at a corner of the table, away from the center where her parents were. From the moment I arrived, I noticed the glances. Camilla's parents, Huyende Frau Muller, looked me up and down with those forced smiles that rich people use when they have to be polite to someone they consider inferior. "Guten Abend," they said when greeting me, and I responded with a simple "Buenas noches" in Spanish, pretending I understood nothing more than that. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded normally. David talked animatedly about his work. Camilla smiled in that perfect way she had perfected, and I remained silent, observing. I have always been observant. It is a habit I developed many years ago and it has served me well. It was when the second course was served that it began. Camilla leaned toward her father and whispered something, in German. She thought that I wouldn't understand. Of course, all the times we had been together, I had only spoken in Spanish or my basic English. I never had reason to reveal that I understood her language perfectly, in German. "That old, poor, old-fashioned woman shouldn't be here. She embarrasses me," my daughter-in-law said with a sweet smile on her face as if she were paying a compliment. My heart stopped for a second. She called me old. Poor and old-fashioned. She said she was embarrassed I was there. The words hit me like buckets of cold water, but I kept my expression composed. Years of diplomacy had taught me to control my emotions. Her father laughed softly and replied, in German, "Be patient, my daughter. She won't be here forever." She won't be here forever, as if I were a temporary annoyance they would soon be rid of, Camilla continued. In German, David is so naive. He thinks he needs her, but she's just a burden. I felt something inside me harden. I had endured many things in my 67 years. I had lost my husband when David was barely 12 years old. I had worked 2 jobs to raise him alone. I had sacrificed my own dreams to ensure he had a college education. And now his wife was calling me a burden. Camilla's mother joined the conversation. In German, "Maybe we can help David find a better solution for her." A better solution for me, as if I were a problem that needed solving. I kept my hands still in my lap, even though inside I was shaking with rage. My son continued chattering happily, completely oblivious to the conversation unfolding in German around him. Camilla occasionally translated irrelevant comments for him, maintaining the facade of the perfect daughter-in-law. For the next 20 minutes, I overheard comments about my cheap clothes, my modest apartment, and how I was an obstacle to David's progress in life. According to Camilla, I was holding him back with my constant needs and lack of sophistication. When dessert arrived, an elaborate tiramisu that probably cost more than a week's worth of food, Camilla made the comment that almost made me lose my composure. In German, every time we visit, her clothes and that perfume. It smells cheap. I can hardly stand being here, she said. I froze. The perfume I was wearing was the same one I'd used for the past 15 years, a gift from my late husband that I bought in small quantities because it was what I could afford. To Camila, it was just another symbol of my lower status. Her father nodded understandingly. In German, people like that don't understand our world. They're used to their limited existence. At that moment, something shifted inside me. The sadness and humiliation I'd been feeling transformed into something colder, more calculated. I looked at Camila, who continued to smile as she spoke with David about her plans for the upcoming vacation, and felt a smile of my own forming on my lips. If Camila and her family wanted to play this game, I was more than ready to participate. After all, they were right about one thing. They didn't know my world, but I knew there's better than they could ever imagine. I laughed softly, almost to myself, but loud enough for Camila to notice. When she looked up at me, I could see a flash of confusion in her eyes. Maybe she was wondering what I was laughing at. She would soon find out. That night, after dinner, I stayed up until 3 a.m., reminiscing. I couldn't stop thinking about Camila's words, but more than that, I couldn't stop remembering my life in Berlin, the 8 years I had never told anyone about. Not even David, my son, thought that after his father died, I had stayed on working at the post office until I retired. It was easier to let him believe that than to explain the complicated truth of what I had really done with my life. The truth was that when David turned 18 and left for university, I left too. I had received a job offer that would change my life forever, but it required me to keep certain secrets. I worked as a translator and interpreter at the American consulate in Berlin for 8 full years. It was no coincidence. My late husband, Roberto, had been a language professor before he died, and he had taught me German during our marriage. He always said my ear for languages was exceptional. After his death, I continued to study on my own, perfecting my pronunciation with videos and books. It was my way of keeping a part of him alive. When the position in Berlin opened, I initially didn't consider it. David had just graduated from high school, and I felt I should stay nearby, but he convinced me to take the opportunity. "Mom," he had told me with that smile he inherited from his father, "you've sacrificed your entire life for me. It's time you did something for yourself." And so it was that at 42, I found myself living in a foreign city surrounded by diplomats, politicians, and influential people from all over Europe. My job wasn't just to translate documents, it was to interpret confidential conversations, mediate sensitive meetings, and maintain absolute discretion about everything I heard. The Germans respected my professionalism. In 8 years, I never had a single complaint about my job. On the contrary, I received 3 promotions and, by the end, I was earning more money than I'd ever seen in my entire life, enough to buy my small apartment when I returned and to have savings David never knew existed, but there was more to it than money and professional experience. During those years, I met many prominent German families like the Mullers. The morning after the humiliating dinner, I decided to make a few calls. I had contacts in Berlin that I occasionally kept in touch with. Former colleagues who now worked in different sectors but who remembered my discretion and reliability. "Guten Morgen, Klaus," I said when my former supervisor answered the phone. "This is Paulina Rodriguez. I have a slightly unusual question for you." Klaus was pleased to hear from me. We had maintained a professional friendship all these years. I explained that my daughter-in-law's family, the Mullers from Munich, had come to visit us and that I would like to know more about them. "The Mullers from Munich," Klaus repeated. "Heinrich and Ingrid Muller?" "Exactly," I confirmed. There was a pause. "Paulina. That family. It's interesting you should ask about them. Your daughter-in-law is Camila Muller?" "Yes." "Why, well, let's just say the Mullers have had some financial problems in recent years. Heinrich lost a substantial amount of money in real estate investments gone wrong, around 2 million euros from what I heard. My heart started beating faster. Financial problems. The family has been keeping up appearances, but they've had to sell properties and cut back considerably. In fact, I think the reason Camila moved to America was to escape some legal problems related to the family's debts. I hung up the phone with a smile growing on my face. So Camila's rich family wasn't so rich after all, but that call was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I did more research. Contacted other colleagues, searched German public records I could access thanks to my old credentials, and slowly pieced together a very different picture of the Müller family. Heinrich Müller had lost not only 2 million euros but had also been involved in a tax evasion scandal that forced him to pay enormous fines. The family had had to sell their main home in Munich and move to a much more modest apartment. The import business had closed the year before, but there was more, much more. Camila hadn't told David the whole truth about why she had come to America. It wasn't for the love of adventure or to study, as she had told him. She had fled Germany because she was involved in the family business and had signed documents making her partially responsible for the debts. My sweet daughter-in-law, who had called me old, poor, and outdated, had come to America seeking exactly what she accused me of being, a financial burden on someone else. She had specifically sought out an American man with a steady job who could support her while she hid from her problems in Germany. And David, my naive and trusting son, had been the perfect target. That information would have been enough to confront Camila, but something told me I should wait. I had learned during my years as an interpreter that information is power, but only if used at the right moment. Besides, I had the feeling Camila wasn't finished with her humiliations. During dinner, I had noticed the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't noticing. There was something calculated about her behavior, something that told me this was just the beginning of something bigger. The following Friday I received another invitation, this time for lunch at Camila and David's house. Camila's parents want to spend more time with you before returning to Germany, David explained to me over the phone. I agreed immediately. After all, I had some things to say. As I prepared for that lunch, I reflected on how much things had changed in just 1 week. The woman who had been sitting silently being humiliated no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew the secrets Camila had come to America to hide. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I had bought in Berlin that still fit me perfectly. I applied the perfume Camila had criticized, but this time with a smile. And as I walked to my car, I could practically feel the German words forming on my tongue, waiting for the perfect moment to be unleashed. Poor, old-fashioned little Paulina was about to have a very interesting conversation with her daughter-in-law. Friday lunch was different from the moment I walked through the door. Camila greeted me with that fake smile I'd learned to recognize, but there was something else in her eyes, a kind of cruel confidence, as if she'd planned something special for me. "Paulina, it's so nice that you could come," she said in English, kissing my cheeks theatrically. "My parents are eager to get to know you better." David was in the kitchen preparing the drinks, completely oblivious to the tension I could feel in the air. Camila's parents were already seated in the living room, and when I walked in, their greetings were even colder than the week before. "Guten Tag," Heinrich murmured without leaving the sofa. "Good day," I replied, maintaining my facade of only speaking Spanish. This time, the seating arrangement was even more insulting. They placed me in a small chair next to the window, while they formed a semicircle in the main living room area. It was as if I were a spectator at my own humiliation. For the first few minutes, they chatted in English about trivial things, the weather, the parents' flight back to Germany, Camila's plans to redecorate the house. But I knew they were waiting for something. I could sense it in the way Camila kept glancing at me out of the corner of her eye, like a cat waiting for the perfect moment to jump on a mouse. When David went out into the backyard to check the grill, the real show began. Camila leaned toward her parents and began speaking, in German, but this time with more venom than before. In German, I told David that maybe we should put her in a nursing home. She'll only become more of a burden as she gets older. My breath caught. A nursing home. They were planning to get rid of me completely. Heinrich nodded approvingly. In German, that's very sensible. My daughter. It would be best for everyone. Ingrid added, in German, David is too kind-hearted. He doesn't see that she's taking advantage of him financially. The irony was almost funny. My son sent me $200 a month because he insisted on it, not because I asked him to. I had my own savings and my own pension and had never been a financial burden to anyone. But Camila wasn't finished. She stood up and walked to the window, looking directly at me as she spoke to her parents. In German, she doesn't understand a word we say. Look at her sitting there like some old, confused animal. That was enough. 27 years of diplomacy, of keeping secrets, of being professional and discreet. Vanished in an instant. I stood up slowly, feeling the blood rush through my veins with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Camila continued speaking, now addressing me directly while her parents laughed softly. In German, pathetic. I bet she thinks we're talking about the weather. I cleared my throat and smiled. A real smile, not like the fake ones I'd been using. Camila stopped mid-sentence, noticing something different in my expression. Eigentlich, I said slowly, savoring each word. Ich verstehe jedes Wort, das du sagst, my dear daughter-in-law. Translation, actually, I understand every word you say. The silence that followed was absolute. Camila turned completely pale. As if she had seen a ghost. Heinrich sat up straight in his seat, his eyes widening. Ingrid dropped her coffee cup, the liquid spilling over her expensive skirt. Hast du gesagt? Camila stammered. What did you just say? I walked toward her slowly, enjoying every second of her shock. I said that I understand every word you have said, Camila, every insult, every cruel plan, every lie you have told about me. I addressed her parents in perfect German. Guten Tag, und Frau Müller. Mein Name ist Paulina Rodriguez, und ich habe 8 Jahre lang als Dolmetscherin im amerikanischen Konsulat in Berlin gearbeitet. Good day, Mr. and Mrs. Müller. My name is Paulina Rodriguez. And I worked for 8 years as an interpreter at the American Consulate in Berlin. Heinrich stood up so quickly he almost staggered. Das ist unmöglich, impossible. I repeated in Spanish, slipping back into my native language, as I watched them struggle to process what had just happened. What's impossible? That a poor, old-fashioned woman like me can speak German? Or that I've heard every cruel word you've said about me? Camila slumped into a chair, her face still drained of color. I never said many things, Camila, I interrupted. I never said that for 8 years I worked with some of the most prominent families in Germany. I never said that I have contacts in Berlin who can tell me very interesting stories about certain families in Munich. Heinrich and his wife exchanged panicked glances. They knew exactly what I meant. David walked in from the courtyard at that moment with a tray of roast meat and a smile on his face. How are things here? Are you getting to know each other better? I looked at my son, my dear, innocent son, and then I looked back at Camila. She was looking at me with pleading eyes, clearly terrified of what I might say next. Oh, yes, I said calmly. We're getting to know each other much better. In fact, I think Camila and I have a lot more in common than we thought. Camila gulped audibly. Her parents looked ready to bolt. Right, Camila? I asked, keeping my voice sweet but my eyes steady on hers. We've both lived in Germany. We've both had to adapt to new circumstances. We both understand what it means to keep certain secrets. The word secrets made Heinrich visibly nervous. Camila bit her lower lip, a habit I'd noticed she had when she was extremely stressed. David looked at us in confusion. What secrets are you talking about? I smiled and took my son's hand. Oh, we were just exchanging stories about our times in Germany, weren't we, Camila? I think your wife has a lot of interesting stories to tell you about her life before she met you. Camila's eyes were filled with pure panic. She knew that I knew, and she knew that at this moment I had all the power, but this was only the beginning. After years of silent humiliation, it was finally my turn to speak. David continued to look at us in confusion while I savored the power I felt for the first time in months. Camila was trapped, and she knew it. Her parents seemed ready to disappear, but they couldn't leave without seeming rude in front of David. Well, my son said, placing the tray on the table. I'm glad you're getting along. Mom, you never mentioned that you had lived in Germany. There are many things I've never mentioned, Mijo, I replied softly. Sometimes you learn that it's better to save certain experiences for the right moment. Camila cleared her throat nervously. David, maybe we should start serving lunch. Of course, he said, but I could see that something in the atmosphere had him uneasy. Mom, could you help Camila in the kitchen? Of course, I smiled. Camila and I have a lot to talk about. In the kitchen, away from David and his parents, Camila finally broke down. Her hands shook as she pretended to fix the dishes. What do you want? She whispered in English, avoiding my gaze. What do I want? I repeated in Spanish, enjoying her desperation. I want the truth, Camila. I want you to tell my son why you really came to America. I don't know what you're talking about, she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. No? Then maybe I should tell him about the 2 million euros your family lost. Or about the debts that forced you to sell your house in Munich, or about why you really had to leave Germany. Camila turned to me, her eyes filling with panicked tears. Please. David doesn't need to know that. Oh, no? I asked, crossing my arms. But he did need to know that his mother is a poor, old, outmoded woman who should be in a nursing home. I didn't mean it like that. Of course you did, I said firmly. Every word you said was deliberate. You thought I was too stupid to understand, too insignificant to fight back. Camila wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What can I do to fix this? I looked at her for a long moment. For weeks I'd fantasized about this moment. But now that it was here, I realized I didn't want to humiliate her the way she'd humiliated me. I wanted something deeper, respect. First, I said calmly, you're going to stop lying about your past. David deserves to know who he married. That would destroy him, she protested. No, I corrected her. Lies destroy him. The truth, even if it hurts, at least gives him the chance to make informed decisions. We returned to the living room where David was having an uneasy conversation with Heinrich and Ingrid, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. David, I said, sitting down next to my son, I think it's time you knew a few things about my past, and Camila's, too. Camila stiffened, but didn't dare protest. After you left for university, I worked for 8 years in Berlin as a diplomatic interpreter. It was an amazing experience that allowed me to meet many prominent German families. David blinked, processing this information. You worked in Berlin for 8 years? Mom, why did you never tell me? Because part of my job required discretion, I explained. But also because when I returned, you already had your own life. I didn't see the need to complicate things. Heinrich shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew this was just the beginning. During those years, I continued, I learned a lot about German families, their culture, traditions, and economic challenges. I looked directly at Camila's parents. For example, I learned about families who had serious financial problems in recent years, who lost millions in failed investments and had to keep up appearances while struggling with enormous debts. The color drained from Heinrich's face. Ingrid began to nervously play with her necklace. David looked between us, clearly sensing something important was happening but not understanding what. Camila, I said softly, don't you think it's time you told David about your family's financial problems? About why you really decided to come to America, Paulina, please, Camila murmured. Financial problems? David asked, looking at his wife. Camila. You said your family owned a successful import business. Heinrich finally spoke, his voice strained. We've had a few temporary setbacks. Setbacks? I repeated with a cold smile. Interesting way to describe the loss of €2 million and the complete closure of the family business. David stood up abruptly. What's going on here, Camila? Is this true? Camila started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the tears of someone whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. David, can I explain? She said. Then explain, my son said, his voice more serious than I'd heard it in years. My family, yes, we had some problems, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. Some problems, I chimed in. Camila, tell him about the debts. Tell him about why you had to leave Germany. Tell him the truth. Heinrich stood up. I think we should go. No, David said firmly. No one leaves until we understand what's going on. Camila looked desperately at her parents, then at me, searching for some way out. But I had learned during my years in diplomacy that sometimes the only way out is through the truth. My family lost everything, she finally admitted. Dad made terrible investments and we lost the house, the business, everything. There were legal problems too. Tax evasion. I came to America because I needed a fresh start, and me? David asked, his voice cracking. Where do I fit into all this? Camila didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Her silence said it all. My son sat heavily, as if the weight of the realization were physical. So you sought me out specifically because I had a steady job, because I could support you. It's not that simple, Camila protested weakly. I didn't ask if it was simple, he said. Explain it, but Camila had no answer. For the first time since I'd known her, she was at a loss for words, for carefully constructed lies, for emotional manipulations. David looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was admiration mixed with pain. Mom, how did you know all this? Because for 8 years my job was to understand people and their motivations. I answered gently. And because when someone underestimates you as much as Camila did, eventually they make mistakes. Heinrich and his wife headed for the door without a word. Camila followed them with her eyes, realizing that even her own parents were abandoning her. My son sat silently, processing everything he had heard, and I stood there, feeling for the first time in months that I had regained my dignity. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Camila wasn't the type of person who would give up without a fight. The next few days were an emotional roller coaster. David hadn't spoken to Camila since Friday's disastrous lunch, and she had been calling me desperately, alternating between pathetic pleas and thinly veiled threats. I didn't answer her calls, but I did listen to her voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. Paulina, please, we need to talk. David isn't talking to me, and this is all a misunderstanding, the first message said. By the 10th, her tone had changed completely. If you ruin my marriage, I assure you, you will regret it. I'll find a way to make you pay for this, typical Camila. When she couldn't manipulate with tears, she resorted to threats. The following Wednesday, David came to visit me at my apartment. He looked terrible, as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were swollen, and he had that lost expression I remembered from when he was a child and something had hurt him deeply. Mom, he said, sitting down on my small couch. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I've always been honest with you, I replied, pouring him a cup of coffee. Is there anything else I should know about Camila? Anything you've discovered during your investigation? I sat across from him, carefully considering my words. For the past few days, I'd been debating with myself about how much I should reveal. Part of me wanted to protect him from additional pain. But a larger part knew he deserved the whole truth. Yes, I said finally. There's more. His face fell, but he nodded. Tell me everything. Camila didn't just come to America fleeing her family's financial problems. I began. According to my contacts in Berlin, she had been specifically looking for an American man with a steady job. She had been on several international dating sites for over a year before finding you. David closed his eyes as if he'd been physically struck. There's more, I continued. Her family's legal troubles weren't just about tax evasion. Heinrich had been using the family business to launder money for acquaintances with criminal connections. When it all fell apart, Camila was technically an accomplice because she had signed documents as part of the operation. My God, David muttered. That's why she had to leave Germany so quickly, not just because of the debts, but because she could have faced criminal charges. David stood up and began pacing around my small living room. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see any of these signs? Because she's very good at what she does, I said softly. She's an expert manipulator. Just then, my phone rang. It was Camila again. This time I decided to answer, but I put the call on speaker so David could listen. Paulina, Camila said, her voice tense and desperate. I know David is there. I've seen his car outside your building for hours. David and I exchanged surprised looks. She had been watching my apartment. What do you want, Camila? I asked. I want David to know that I truly love him. Yes, maybe the circumstances of how we met weren't ideal, but my feelings are real. Really? I asked with sarcasm. Like when you planned to put me in a nursing home? Were those feelings real too? There was a pause. I never meant that seriously. I was nervous about my parents visiting and I said stupid things. David took the phone. Camila, it's me, David, my love, please, we need to talk. This is all your mother's fault. She's trying to separate us because she never liked me. I watched my son as Camila tried the same tactic as always. Make me the villain. Camila, David said in a voice I'd never heard from him before, cold and firm. My mother didn't tell me anything that wasn't true. I've verified some of it, the financial problems, the reasons you came to America. It's all true. Is it true you specifically looked for an American man to marry? Is it true you were on dating sites for more than a year before you found me? Silence. Is it true your family lost 2 million euros and that you could have faced criminal charges in Germany? More silence. Answer me, Camila. Finally her voice cracked. Yes, but David, that doesn't mean I don't love you. What does it mean then? My son asked, and I could hear the pain in his voice. What part of our marriage has been real? Everything has been real since we got married, she insisted. Maybe my initial motives weren't pure. But I fell in love with you. Truly. Like you fell in love with me when you called your mother to ask how long she thought she would live. Did you hear that conversation too, Mom? I froze. I hadn't heard that conversation, but from David's expression it was obvious that he had. David, I whispered, when did you hear this? Yesterday, he said, his voice breaking. I was at home when Camila thought I'd gone out. She called her mother and they spoke in German about how long they thought you'd live and when they could convince me to put you in a nursing home. My heart broke, not for me, but for my son. He had heard with his own ears the confirmation that his wife had been planning to get rid of me. Is that true, Camila? I asked into the phone. There was no response for several seconds. Then, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. My parents need financial help, and with Paulina living forever. I repeated, feeling a cold fury run through my veins. If your mother weren't always needing attention and money, Camila continued, ignoring me, we could help my parents. We could have a better life. David hung up. He sat in silence for several minutes with his head in his hands. Finally he looked up at me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I was so blind. I'm sorry I let her treat you like that. My son, I said softly. You don't have to apologize for anything. She deceived you. You're a good person, and she took advantage of that. What am I going to do? He asked. We're married. We have a life together. You have options, I told him. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Paulina Rodriguez, asked a male voice with a German accent. Yes. Who is this? My name is Klaus Weber. I work for the Financial Investigations Department in Munich. We're investigating the activities of the Muller family and understand you have connections to them. David and I exchanged alarmed looks. Camila Muller is married to my son, I said carefully. I understand, Mrs. Rodriguez. We need to speak with you about anything you may know regarding the Mullers' activities during the last 5 years. Would it be possible for us to come to the United States to interview you? I looked at David, who was listening to every word with a shocked expression. Does this have to do with the family's financial problems? I asked. It's more complicated than that, Klaus replied. But yes, it's related. We're also interested in speaking with Camila Muller. We believe she may have valuable information about her father's operations. After I hung up, David and I sat in silence. The situation had escalated beyond our worst fears. Mom, David said finally. I think my wife isn't just a liar and a manipulator. I think she might be a criminal. 3 months after that call from Klaus Weber, my life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. David had initiated divorce proceedings immediately after the German authorities confirmed that Camila was officially a person of interest in the investigation into her family's money laundering. Camila tried everything to avoid the divorce. She cried, begged, threatened, and finally tried to blackmail David, threatening to reveal family secrets that turned out to be pathetic lies. When she realized David wasn't going to change his mind, she showed her true nature. Your mother ruined everything, she shouted during the only phone conversation they had after he filed for divorce. That nosy old woman destroyed our marriage because she couldn't stand someone else being important in your life. David had recorded that conversation, and when he played it for me, I laughed. After months of pain and humiliation, I could finally laugh at Camila's pathetic attempts to manipulate the situation. You know what's funniest? I told David as we had coffee in my apartment. She's right about one thing. I did destroy her marriage, but not because I was jealous or meddling. I destroyed it because I couldn't stay silent while she lied to you and used you. David smiled for the first time in weeks. Thank you for not staying silent, Mom. The divorce process was surprisingly quick. Camila couldn't afford expensive lawyers, and with the pending criminal investigation in Germany, her legal situation was precarious. David had been smart financially during the marriage and had kept most of his assets separate, so there wasn't much to divide. Most satisfying of all was when Camila had to admit officially during a legal deposition that she had lied about the circumstances of her arrival in America and about her family's background. Seeing the woman who had called me pathetic and confused, sitting in a law office admitting her own lies, was more gratifying than any revenge I could have planned. But real justice came when Klaus Weber visited the United States to interview me officially. It turned out that my years as a diplomatic interpreter gave me credibility with the German authorities, and my testimony about the Mullers' connections was valuable to their investigation. Mrs. Rodriguez, Klaus told me during our interview, your information has been very helpful. It's rare to find someone with your professional experience who also has personal knowledge of the subjects of our investigation. During that interview, I also learned something Camila had never told me. She hadn't only been looking for an American husband, she had been looking for someone in my city. Because she had researched state elder care laws and thought it would be easier to get rid of me here than in other states. She had been even more calculating than I thought. 6 months after the divorce, I received an unexpected call. It was Ingrid, Camila's mother. Paulina, she said in a tired voice. I know I have no right to call you, but I wanted to apologize. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. Camila lied to us about many things, she continued. She told us you were hostile to her, that you tried to sabotage the marriage from the beginning. We didn't know she had been insulting you in our language, and now? What has happened? I asked. Heinrich is in prison. She said simply. The investigation revealed much more than we expected. Camila had to return to Germany to testify. She's facing her own charges. I sat slowly on my favorite sofa, processing this information. We wanted you to know, Ingrid continued, that when we learned the truth about how she had treated you, we were ashamed. We didn't raise our daughter to be cruel to her elders. Where is Camila now? I asked, living in a small apartment in Berlin, working an entry-level office job. Her life is not what she had planned. After hanging up, I sat thinking about that conversation for a long time. Part of me felt satisfied to know that Camila was facing the consequences of her actions. But a larger part of me simply felt at peace. David had met someone new, a woman named Sarah who worked in his office. She was kind, genuine, and, most importantly, she treated me with respect from the first day. Not because she knew who I had been or what I had done, but because she understood that respecting your partner's parents is fundamental in a healthy relationship. I like Sarah, I told David one Sunday while we had lunch at my apartment. She had insisted on helping me in the kitchen and had listened genuinely when I told stories about David's childhood. Me too, David smiled. And I think the difference is that Sarah loves me, including my family. Camila loved me despite my family. That night, after David and Sarah left, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, reflecting on everything that had happened. For months I had been the poor, old-fashioned woman in Camila's eyes, an obstacle, a burden, something to be disposed of. But I knew who I really was. I was Paulina Rodriguez, a woman who had worked with diplomats and politicians, who had lived in a foreign city and thrived, who had raised a wonderful son as a single mother, and who had the strength and dignity to defend her family when necessary. I didn't need validation from Camila or her family. I didn't need to be seen as anything more than a burden. I knew my own worth. 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Camila, sent from Berlin. The handwriting was shaky, different from her normally perfect script. Paulina, the letter began. I know I have no right to write to you, and I understand if you don't read this, but I needed to try to explain some things. In recent months I've had a lot of time to think about my actions and my words. I've lost everything, my marriage, my family, my status, my comfort. I'm living a very different life now, one where I have to work hard jobs for little money, where I live in a small apartment and count every euro. I never properly asked your forgiveness for the horrible things I said about you, calling you old, poor, and old-fashioned, planning to put you in a nursing home, trying to pull David away from you. None of that was justifiable. But I want you to know something else. While I was insulting and belittling you, you kept your dignity. You never shouted at me, never insulted me back, never stooped to my level. Even when you exposed me, you did it with an elegance I've never had. Now I understand why David respects you so much. What I called weakness in you was actually strength I've never possessed. I don't expect your forgiveness, I don't think I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally see who you really are, and I'm ashamed it took me so long to see it. With the respect I should have shown from the beginning, Camila, I read the letter 3 times. Then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't reply either. Some apologies don't need a response, they just need to be acknowledged. That night David called to tell me that he and Sarah had gotten engaged. I wanted you to be the first to know, Mom, he said with genuine joy in his voice. And what does Sarah think about having a mother-in-law who's old, poor, and old-fashioned? I joked. David laughed. She says she loves the idea of a mother-in-law who's had international adventures and is smart enough to catch liars in their own lies. after hanging up, I kept smiling. My life had returned to its normal routine, but with one important difference. I no longer felt invisible. I no longer felt like a burden or an obstacle in my son's life. I was simply Paulina, a 67-year-old woman who had lived an interesting life, who had raised a good man, and who had had the strength to defend her family when necessary. And that, I decided, was more than enough.